Starting off, how is grain storage different here than what you see back home in Oklahoma?
A lot of our products are the same, but Oklahoma doesn't have near as much on-farm storage as you do here in Nebraska. In Oklahoma, we're a commodity state where we harvest it, take it to the local elevator, and it goes into the commodity market from there. Where here in Nebraska, I see an awful lot of on-farm storage. Some of your family farm storage is as big as our commercial storage.
What are some general rules to follow when it comes to grain bin storage? Does it all come down to just keeping that grain the right temperature, keeping it dry? What other recommendations?
That really is the basics, temperature and moisture. If you can manage those two things, you've got a leg up on the game. But there's some other things you need to think about, and it's that your marketing strategy is one thing to keep in mind. Are you going to handle this long term in your facility, or is it going to move out in the next month or so? You can handle something a little wetter if you're not going to store it as long. So it comes down to marketing. It's all one big system. Everything that you do and the decisions you make in a grain facility all plays into the quality of that product and the safety and the environment and how much money you're going to make.
And here in Nebraska, we've had a very wet growing season. I know you said in Oklahoma it's been a little wet for you guys too.
Not
nearly like what we've had.
No.
But what are some recommendations for before you store that crop that may have a little more moisture than what it should?
Yeah, again, back to marketing. If you're wanting to store something for a long period of time, you might want to rethink that this year, because it's going to be wetter going in, and that's always causes us some problems. Planning to monitor is just really important this year. We've just pulled out all of the stops on monitoring. Everything you ever thought you knew about holding grain, this is your year to practice that, because we're going to have some challenges.
How often does the grain need to be checked by the farmer once it's stored?
If you're over about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature's over 50 degrees, I would check it every week if you can, every couple of weeks at least. Now when we get into the winter, when it's colder out, that grain's a lot more stable, so you can go once a month. But when it's warmer and the insects have the potential of being active, and mold depends on where you're at in the state, but mold will develop more over 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So checking it weekly is a really good plan if you have the time to do that.
And if all the precautions are followed when you're storing that grain, how long is it going to last, or is it eventually going to go bad?
Oh gosh, if you've got everything, if it's dry and everything is in place and good quality, you can store it for years. It really is a stable product. That first year is the most critical, but if you're keeping an eye on the insects and they don't invade, and it's a dry climate or dry atmosphere in the bin, you can store for several years. And that's not going to be this year.
Sure. And this may go without saying, but why is it important to only store grain in a bin that is meant to store grain?
Well, there's two reasons. One of them is structural, and that is a big thing to consider. We've had bins that collapsed, and it's because something either was not right structurally with them to begin with, or we've done something that's not within their characteristic of holding grain. Wind loads can be a problem, snow loads can be a problem depending on where you are in the state and how that bin was designed. A bin, if it's recycled quite often, that needs to be a commercial bin instead of a farm storage bin, because you need more stiffeners. So there's some engineering things that have to happen for that bin to move. And bins always move. Every time you load them and unload them, they're moving. They're expanding and contracting. If you're going to do that very often, the bin wears out. The other side of that is when we put grain in there that's not in good condition, it can expand, especially soybeans. They expand, and they can actually rupture a bin. When we're unloading that bin, we want to unload it evenly from all over the bin. You don't want it to get like this in that bin, because when you get like this, the forces in the bin are not equal, and it will collapse in that case.
What are some alternative methods for grain storage?
Well, they're all pretty risky, but we'll go over them anyway.
Yeah, let's hear about them.
The grain piles is the first one that comes to mind when we're out of storage in our facilities, and the next step is to put it in a pile outside. There are some wall systems with tarps that make good options, and they're used quite often up north. Some of them even go long term with them, but they have built-in aeration systems, and they're a system all themselves. When we put it directly on the ground without a wall system and just a tarp over it, or maybe not even a tarp, you just have to consider economically that you're going to lose part of that pile. It is definitely a temporary situation.
Yeah, it seems like you're just asking for it if you don't even put the tarp over it.
You just really are. There's going to be some moisture, and of course the animals, the wildlife love grain piles. That's feast for them. So there's some management issues that go with tarping and maintaining a ground pile outside, and it's certainly your first bulk that you want to move out is the one that's in the grain pile. The other way we can store temporarily is in bags. That's kind of a newer thing with the wheat and corn, and other than silage storage is putting it in bags. Bags have some good things about them and some bad things. You can still expect to lose a layer on the top and on the bottom of that. But otherwise, if you can keep the wildlife from breaking that barrier with the bag, it's a pretty good way to store a product. Do you have to learn how to load them? The first one you make will look like a pregnant caterpillar, but after that it gets a little better. It takes some equipment to unload them, but it is a good option for temporary storage.
And finally, any new grain bin storage research or grain safety research that you'd like to tell us about?
We've been doing a lot of work in the area of safety. As you know, we've had some really big tragedies in the United States and even here in Nebraska close by recently, and those things don't have to happen. But there's a lot of research being done in the equipment and the PPE, the personal protective equipment that we need to be wearing when we do work in a bin. There's some equipment available now, the zero entry bin sweeps, where those are available. They're very successful. They're a really good investment where no one has to go in the bin to clean out a bin. So there's some things that we can do and some new things that we're developing on how to remediate clods and moisture problems in a bin so that our employees and ourselves don't have to go in that bin. If we stay out of the bins, we don't get entrapped. And so that's the answer, is don't go in the bin. Keep the grain in good condition and don't go in the bin. But research on proper ways to enter a bin, the anchor points that all bins should have, and very few do, those are important, and the design of what those anchor points look like and how they're to be used is a big research topic right now. There is a new grain bin standard out. It came out earlier this year. It was put into place by the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers, big name, that all new steel bins will have anchor points and platforms and larger doors and some new things that will keep our employees safer and our grain in better condition. But there's millions of bins out there that don't have that.